The Legend of Korra is set 70 years after The Last Airbender and follows, well, Korra, as she takes on the role of the Avatar, which means we need to pour out some onion and banana juice for our boy Aang, since a new Avatar only appears upon the death of the old one. Unlike Aang, Korra is a native to the South Pole, just as Katara and Sokka, and it shows, and she is a waterbender at heart. And unlike Aang, Korra is a girl boss at heart too, and put this on full display in the very first episode by blasting through her parents' wall and announcing, "I'm the Avatar, you gotta deal with it!" while ruining her parents' floor, making the repair bill higher and higher for every step she takes. This shit will get you thrown straight down a volcano in the Fire Nation, but as we all know, they're a bit more liberal in the water tribes down south. Speaking of fire, fast forward a couple of years, and Korra is already looking like a massive firebender, taking on multiple opponents at once under the watchful eye of Katara and her trainers, and coming out the victor, which allows her to move on to her last element, air, at the age of 17. Bit of a late bloomer compared to my boy Aang, who got a hang of all the elements in the span of a year, but hey, I don't judge. I'm just getting the hang of socializing at the age of 20. She is told her airbender teacher will be none other than the son of Aang, Tenzin, who's voiced by none other than J.K. Simmons, baby! But unfortunately, she will have to wait, as there is more urgent matters back in Republic City, a multicultural metropolis created by Aang and Zuko after the Hundred Years' War, where Tenzin represents the Air Nation in the government. Korra, however, refuses to wait and disobeys the orders of both Tenzin, her teachers, and supervisors, and leaves for Republic City with some encouragement from Katara, who is now old as fuck. Korra leaves together with her polar bear dog Naga, and together they sneak onto a ship for Republic City. And what is the first thing she does when arriving? Nearly cause several car accidents and destroys city property and local businesses when she decides to throw down with some local gang members, still stacking up bills like no other after all these years. But not to worry, this is perfectly normal Avatar stuff. Remember when Kyoshi got a DUI? Yeah, exactly. She also got charged with manslaughter, but we don't have time to talk about that, because Korra is about to be arrested by the city police, and her handling of the situation is not as smooth as she flees the crime scene, but gets arrested soon after anyway. At the station, she gets interrogated by none other than the chief of police, Lin Beifong, Toph' daughter, who refuses to let a girl boss stay winning. Luckily, Tenzin comes to her rescue and bails her out, but is far from pleased with her and tells her that she will go back to the South Pole immediately. But luckily he changes his mind last minute before she leaves with the boat, and allows her to stay and start her airbending training. And this is the point where shit starts to hit the fan for 51 episodes straight. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to stress straight. I'm so sorry, Kurosami stands. Please forgive me, please. The Legend of Korra consists of 4 books, and in contrast with The Last Airbender, only one focuses on mastering one of the 4 elements. Since Korra has already gaslighted, gate-kept, and girl-bossed every other form of bending despite air by the very first episode, which is a good choice because while it was very fun and interesting to see Aang struggle and eventually master all the 4 elements, it would not be as fun or interesting to see Korra do the same thing, and instead a large part of the Legend of Korra focuses on her first getting over airbending and then her getting in touch with her spiritual side, rocks and shit, a part of being the avatar she is quite lacking in, and her and her friends taking down a new antagonist every book. Yes, instead of having one main antagonist throughout the series like Loser Lord Osai, you get a new and fresh baked antagonist for every new book. You got Communist Daddy, Sigma Male, that guy who took like one philosophy class in college and hasn't shut up since, and of course, Fascist Mommy, each with their own philosophies and goals. This makes every book feel fresh and different from each other, and they're all great antagonists. Well, most of them. But this also creates an issue in that it often feels like the series lacks focus. There's not one common conflict that needs to be solved throughout the 4 books. Instead, it's 4 completely different conflicts, and when you finally finish the series and they defeat the final antagonist, it all feels so anticlimactic. It doesn't feel like anything has been resolved. Instead, you end up asking yourself, who's next? This is the opposite feeling you get in comparison with the ending of the original. The original series had multiple antagonists too, but more importantly it had a main antagonist, Firelight Osai, and one conflict that all the books had in common, the Hundred Years' War. And when Aang takes down the Fire Lord, it feels final. But this is a thing they address towards the end, and in a way it's more realistic and an interesting choice, but it doesn't stop it from feeling unresolved and anticlimactic in the end. But despite this, their respective books feel complete, and the character arcs too feel complete for the most part. And the characters like in the original are the Legend of Korra's backbone. They do something I absolutely love. They let their characters be not only likable, but also dislikable. Taking Korra as an example, she's very impulsive and more aggressive in her nature, especially compared to Aang, and this leads her to doing very dumb stuff like almost destroying an entire city block because she made the impulsive decision of taking the law in her own hands and trying to stop a group of gang members. And this is merely one example of this, and at times you're almost rooting against her because of these poor decisions and choices. But at the same time, a lot of these decisions come from a good place, and she does do more good than bad, and throughout the series you see her develop and mature, learning from her mistakes and fighting her impulsive and aggressive nature and becoming a better avatar, and learning that being the avatar is so much more than just bending. The supporting cast follows this principle as well, and they feel distinct and unique from each other, and each have their own faults, strengths, and goals. Well, most of them at least. You see, there's this one character that's so badly handled that it's baffling that they belong to the same series as the rest of the characters, and that these are the same writers behind Avatar: The Last Airbender. His name is Bolin, and he's the funny character in the Avatar gang. That's it. It's very obvious that the writers wanted to recreate Sokka, but that's very hard when you don't understand what made Sokka a great character to begin with. Sokka is a funny character and the main sort of comedy in the original series, but he's so much more than that. He's also the strategist of the gang, and makes up for his lack of bending by coming up with clever solutions to the gang's problems. He is extremely smart and creative, but lacks confidence and belief in himself, despite how he usually carries himself in the series, and this is something he struggles with and eventually overcomes by the end of the series. He's also a caring friend and a protective brother, a drug addict, and a great warrior. Bolin is the funny character. This is like Ember Island Players, except this time it's not self-parody, this is the actual writing. No wait, I'm sorry, there's actually more to his character. He's also a himbo. I could go on, but as far as I'm concerned this channel is a Bolin free zone now, so we're moving on. This is something that just happens in The Legend of Korra. Dumb stuff in between the good stuff, especially in the first two books. Stuff that doesn't make sense. Stuff that contradicts itself when you think about it too hard, and stuff that's just plain bad writing, and sometimes things that are just weird. An example of this is them trying to explain how bending in the first Avatar came to be, and it's bad and completely unnecessary, and the show would have been better off if this was unexplained like it used to be, but instead we have to hear about how the first Avatar's parents were pushed off a cliff by a rock, a bucket of water, a gust of wind, and some fire or something, and then to avenge them he started to bend the elements to his will for his own personal gain. I don't know, it's bad, and this channel has now officially become a Bolin and Avatar origin story free zone. Another example of weird and bad stuff is that sometimes the backgrounds will look muddy and unfinished, almost as if they accidentally used some concept art instead of the finished piece. Sometimes it's almost as if Sokka was the art director. I mean, it's obviously not because of laziness. These animators and artists work days and nights to create what we love, so it's an artistic decision, but not a very good one. And the backgrounds clashes with the characters who are all very well defined. And it's a shame because the world is beautifully designed and for the most part beautifully illustrated as well. So these instances stick out worse than Aang with hair. They could at the very least have added a rainbow, but it's not all bad, although I cannot put it into words. The animation is better and smoother, which speaks volumes, and in the fight and action scenes they go even more Kyoshi than ever before, and they have also incorporated some beautiful boxing alongside with the traditional Asian martial arts. And The Legend of Korra also knows when it's appropriate to have fun, even though they do take it too far sometimes. Where they don't take it too far is with the soundtrack, which is simply amazing and has elements of the original but also its own unique flavor. In a lot of ways The Legend of Korra is a mixed bag. It has a great cast of characters and a story that's good and works, for the most part. That's something you can apply to a lot of things in The Legend of Korra. The series is good, for the most part, but only starts being something quite special by Book 3. Book 1 and 2 are good, but besides a few instances they never truly become anything more than that and are in large parts forgettable compared to the rest of the series. Book 1 of the original had its hiccups, but had the excuse of being the very first book of the Avatar series, and immediately improved on its faults by Book 2. It's a shame that they haven't learned from this and that this applies to not one book, but two books. They are necessary to get through to truly enjoy what makes The Legend of Korra great and worthy of the Avatar title. Being the sequel to a show like Avatar: The Last Airbender is a fate few pieces of media wish upon themselves, and a lot of the criticism towards the show originated it being part of the Avatar brand, and some will call this unfair, but it's not. It's a sequel and its plot and world is shaped by what happened in Avatar: The Last Airbender, and a lot of the old characters and locations make a return throughout the 4 books. And a lot of the characters have similarities and parallels to the previous cast, so the creators of Korra bring it on themselves. Both as a standalone and a sequel, it's flawed, but that is not to mean that it's a terrible show, and like Korra is a flawed character, we watch the show alongside her throughout the books improve and get better and better, and though unintentional, I think that's beautiful in a way. So please, go watch The Legend of Korra, and remember, skip all Bolin parts.